What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, one and all. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Eric Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis joining us right now. The Hall of Famer himself, the one and only Ray Didinger. Ray, how we doing, Ray?
Hello, guys. How are you?
Morning or afternoon.
Ray, what's going on?
Morning some places, Derek. It is for sure. Ray, I want to start with this one. The Eagles lost both their coordinators, and that certainly presents its own set of challenges, right? There's no question about that. But sometimes a little fresh blood isn't the worst thing in the world. You know, how do you view this thing with both of these guys going and, you know, kind of what's in front of the Eagles here as we move forward?
Yeah, it can work both ways. We all saw what happened to the Eagles when Andy Reid's original staff began breaking up. That original coaching staff that Andy had, 99 into the early 2000s, was, in my view, the best coaching staff the Eagles ever had. Some of the guys Andy decided to keep, he inherited, and then other guys he brought in, some of whom we knew, some of whom we had heard of, some of whom were total strangers. But I think, not to take anything away from Big Red, who masterminded the whole thing, but I think a lot of the success and the sudden success that team had starting in 2000 and then going on for a while was the function of how good that staff was. Mm-hmm. We came very quickly to learn how good a coach Jim Johnson was. Most people didn't know who he was, but we learned real fast. But then a lot of the other guys were guys that we didn't know, and we realized, boy, this guy's really a good coach. And that group, the coordinators all the way down to the position coaches, we learned over time were not just good, but excellent. And it's one of the reasons why that team got good real fast and stayed real good. But then, as always happens with successful football teams, you know, other teams start cherry picking your staff. And as a lot of those guys left for other jobs and better jobs, the guys that they brought in to replace them weren't nearly as good. And that's when you began to see the whole operation start to backslide. And there was no question that had an impact. And I think sometimes when you get into these decisions where the guy on top, in this case, the head coach, he's going to decide where he wants to go. And Andy, Andy was very loyal. And whenever one of his guys left, he tried to promote from within. He tried to stay with his group of guys and give other guys who had been assistants, give them their opportunity. And sometimes it didn't work out. You know, you lose John Harbaugh, and your answer is to promote Rory Segrist to special teams coach.
I forgot about that. Oh.
Yeah, that's he was in over his head, and the special teams went from the best in the league to the worst. It was a bad decision. Then, there are other, you lose Jim Johnson. You give Sean McDermott his opportunity. I actually thought Sean McDermott did a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. I thought he got kind of a raw deal, got forced out. So your answer then is, instead of looking for another coordinator maybe elsewhere, Juan Castillo had been looking to try to move up in the ranks. So Andy gives him his chance to be defensive coordinator. Turned out to be a disaster. So I think sometimes the guy at the top can be too loyal. I think sometimes you always have to be mindful of, I got to go get the best guy. If he happens to be in-house, great. But if I feel like I can do better, to fill this position, I'm going to go out and get the best guy to fill this position. So that's the mindset that I would have, and I would hope the Eagles would have here. I mean, everybody's just assuming that Nick is going to promote from within. I would say keep your options open. If there's a better answer out there somewhere, and somebody you think you can work with who's done this before and has the qualifications, bring him in and talk to him. The loyalty is a great thing, but sometimes I think you can be too loyal, and I think Andy was in the rebuild of his coaching staff.
Ray, when you look at this Eagles defense and look at the stats they accumulated, is just a wow factor across the board in terms of historical numbers they put up. But I said earlier this week, the fact that they did not complete the mission of winning the Super Bowl, puts a huge asterisk over this defense as being considered the greatest defense in Eagles history. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, totally. 100%. I agree with you 100%. I mean, there was all this conversation, and I was asked it dozens of times. You guys were probably asked it dozens of times.
Yeah.
As this team's piling up the wins, setting this record, setting that record. Boy, is this the greatest team in Eagles history? And I said, check back with me in February. I mean, if
Yep.
they can't be the greatest if they don't win at all. You can't say you can take all those stats and all those records, and put them in a little plastic bag now, and you can roll them all up and you can put them in a trash can because they don't mean nothing. They don't mean nothing. I mean, when you roll through the season and you're the number one seed and you go into the playoffs and you're the number one seed and you go to the Super Bowl and you're the favorite, and you lose everything you did in the regular season, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but you can't celebrate it because all it did was get you there, and then once you get there, then you got to win. And that was kind of how I felt. I was talking to a guy who worked in the league for a long time. We've been friends for a long time. In the week before the game, and talking about how we sized it up. And he said, who do you like? I said, I like the Eagles. I think they're better. And he said, yeah. He said, the Eagles are really good. He said, but the one thing that bothers me about them is I find myself asking, who did they beat to get there? He said, I just don't know if they beat, how many good teams did they beat? And he said, I think the Chiefs are the best team that they've played, that they will have played. And he said, they beat the Cowboys once with a backup quarterback. They played the Cowboys a second time with Prescott and they lost. Probably the best team they played was the 49ers, but they played them without a quarterback. And I just haven't seen them. And forget the Vikings. I mean, I think we realize now what the Vikings were. Yeah. He said, I just don't know that I've seen them really beat a good team. And he said, and the Chiefs are good. He said, on a scale of who, I would probably say the Eagles are better. He said, but the Chiefs are going to be the best team that they've played all year. And he said, and they've got certainly the best quarterback. He said, I view it as a toss-up. And, I mean, as I was watching the second half of that game, boy, I kept thinking about that. I thought the Eagles were going to win, and I still, looking back on it, I think they should have won.
Yep.
But there's some merit to what he said when you look back over the road that the Eagles traveled to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were the best team. I mean, I voiced my opinion on that. I was ironclad because they were built better in the trenches. I make no excuses. The Chiefs won by 3 points. It was evident that the second half we saw the best player in the NFL pull out his bag of tricks and just played at such a high level. It was just hard for anybody to stop. I don't just look at Gannon and be like, all right, Gannon, but he was just on a roll. He was on fire, and you just couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes at that point. But when I do look at this, and I look at, all right, they made it to the Super Bowl. They got cherry picked by both their coordinators. Should have been all three. In fact, we should have a fire sale for Clay if somebody wants him. We'll give him to you for a box of Cracker Jacks and some almonds or something. We'll give him. He can take him. But what do you do first? Do you sign coordinators or do you sign Jalen? What would be your priority going right now? What's your priority?
I think you got to get the coaches in place.
Yep.
I think you got to get the coaches in place. And yeah, you got your time with Jalen. I think that's going to work itself out. But I think the first priority is completing your coaching staff. And not just all of a sudden walk in the office tomorrow and say, "Hey, Brian, you're the OC." Okay. I think you got to think about this. I think you got to look around. I mean, you got to do some interview and you got to give some thought. This is not. I mean, there's never been a case where a team lost both of a Super Bowl team lost both of its coordinators in the same year. Very often you lose one. Nobody's ever lost two. So the Eagles are being asked now to do something nobody's ever done before in a tough situation, which is trying to come back after losing a Super Bowl. You guys, I'm sure you're aware of the history. I mean, you've had 56 previous Super Bowls, And of the 56 teams that lost, only 8 of them came back the next year. I mean, that's the history of it, and only 3 of them won.
Yeah,
So,
one of them was the Patriots after the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, so right now, I mean, everybody's saying what you would expect everybody to say, you know, and you heard the players say it on Sunday night, you know, we're a great team, you know, we're going to be back, you know, we're going to learn from this, we're going to come back stronger. You know, I've heard it 56 times after 56 Super Bowls. Everybody says it. History would tell you it's very hard to do.
Yep.
Now, you know, maybe these guys can do it. If you want to be super glass full, that the only perfect season in NFL history came off of one of these, that the 72 Dolphins lost the Super Bowl the year before, came back the next year and ran the table, went 17-0, the only perfect season. That came off a Super Bowl loss, but that's the exception. Most of the time, teams find it hard to do. And now the job is going to be further complicated by the fact you got to now complete your coaching staff by filling the 2 big chairs. And to me, that's, you know, I think that's priority number 1. And that's why I would really encourage the Eagles to not rush into this, to just really think it through and bring the best guys in. Because if getting back is your main goal, and which should be right now, understand that it's, you know, that this is not going to be easy. You know, you were at the top, you just got knocked to the bottom, and now you got to work your way back up, and that's a long, hard climb.
Ray, how do you prioritize, you know, I'll just go to the defensive side of the ball, the free agents, whether it's Gardner Johnson, whether it's Bradbury, Hargrave, who had double-digit sacks, you know, Brandon Graham, whoever else you want to throw in there, Fletcher Cox, et cetera. How would the linebackers, how would you prioritize if, you know, if you had your druthers? I know a lot of this is going to depend on what these guys are asking, but for you, who's number 1?
Yeah. I would probably say Hargrave would be my number 1. I think guys who can play that position the way he plays it, and I think he's still got some good football left. He's not up towards the end of his career. I think he's got a ways to go. And a guy that can play inside like that and be a double-digit sack guy is very valuable. But everybody knows it, and there aren't that many guys like him. So he's probably going to get the most traction in the free agent market. He's probably going to get the most teams after him, and his price tag is going to be pretty high. But if you ask me to prioritize him, who would be my number one? Who would be my number 1 to bring back? I would probably say him, because I think he would be hard to replace.
Ray, when you look back on the Super Bowl, we saw the miscues. The defense was a no-show in the second half. But from a coaching structure, philosophy, compared to plays, what's the one thing that stands out to you that really shocked you about the Eagles coming up short in that game?
Shocked me. I would look at it from the other side. The thing that I didn't expect that turned out to be absolutely critical was I didn't expect the Chiefs to run the ball that way. I just didn't see that coming. I mean, the idea that Andy Reid is going to win a Super Bowl by running the football. Whoa, what world are we living in? And I think that the Eagles probably expected it too. You know, I think the Eagles were probably caught a little flat-footed on that too. You go into a game where Andy Reid is the coach and Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. You don't expect them to be handing the ball off much, and I think they probably game planned it that way. And you know, we all kind of talked around it this year because so many other things were going well. But the fact of the matter is, teams that wanted to run the ball on the Eagles, they were able to run the ball.
Yeah.
Now, partly because they were such a high-scoring team, and they were getting leads. You know, a lot of times teams didn't have any choice; they had to throw to play catch-up. But you saw games when teams came out with the determination that we're gonna run the ball on you. They were pretty successful. Now, I didn't think that Andy would take that approach because he rarely does. but to his credit, he did. And I think that had a tremendous impact on the game because that was something I don't think anybody foresaw. Mm-hmm. And everybody talks about how the pass rush, they didn't get the pass rush and didn't get the pressure on Mahomes, and that was certainly critical. But part of the reason why they didn't was all of a sudden here the Chiefs are running the ball for 5, 6, 7 yards, and that will slow down your pass rush. If they think, hey, these guys they're going to run it, and we got to figure out how to stop the run in addition to getting pressure on the quarterback. If you can run the ball the way the Chiefs ran the ball, and they average 6 yards a carry now, that will slow down your pass rush too, and that was something that I think caught everybody by surprise.
How big of a disappointment was special teams the entire year, and that we didn't do anything really to rectify it? We kind of rectified the running game. Teams trying to run on us, with bringing in Linville Joseph and Dominic Sue, but to keep the same guy that orchestrated the 2 worst special teams I've ever seen in my life, keeping them there, I don't understand how you can do that and think you're gonna go forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, Barrett, and we talked about it. Again, when you have a season where so many things go right, and you're 14-3, and you're the number 1 seed, and you're the number 1 in the power rankings, and and to after the game say, boy, the special teams, they really got to do something. It really sounds like you're nitpicking. No. People say, you guys are just looking for stuff to complain about.
Right?
Well, no, we're not. what we're doing is we're pointing out something. Okay, you were able to beat the Tennessee Titans. You were able to beat. You're able to win this game, win that game. But somewhere down the road against a really good team, this is very likely to come back and bite you here. And the idea that it's not that big a deal. Well, yeah, it is. I always thought that. I always thought that. Now, the fact that Elliott was so good, and the fact that Elliott was money every time you needed a field goal kind of overrode it. People say special teams. Well, no, what do you mean? Or okay, Elliott's fine, but your punter is a real problem, and your punt coverage is a real problem, and your kick coverage in general isn't real good. And it was just hanging out there. It was just hanging out there, and there was just that it's going to come up at the worst possible time. And boy, did it ever in that game. And I know there was some talk. I was on IP like 2 weeks ago. I guess during the dead week before Super Bowl, and I was on with Cameron Ritchie, and we were talking about the punter situation because at that point Sippis was back, and Sippis was practicing, and Kern was still here, and John said, I'd go get a new punter right now. I wouldn't go with either of these guys, because we've already seen that Kern's not that good, and Sippis wasn't that good, and he hasn't now punted in 2 months. Mm-hmm. He said there are guys out on the street now that are better than either of these 2 guys. Mm-hmm. Then we got into the whole issue. Okay, well then who's going to hold for the kicks? And it becomes more complicated than people would like to make it. Mm-hmm. But I found it interesting that a guy who's played in the league as he did, has been on Super Bowl teams, thought that the punting was such a problem that I would have no problem. He said, if I were the Eagles right now, I'd be looking for another punter right now. And even if it was just bringing him in for 1 game, I think they need to do that because I think either of these 2 guys are not going to get the job done. And it was, it's a 38-yard line drive that that Tony takes and turns the game all around. When I look back on that whole sequence, there's that 3rd and 2 play there that is so huge. The Chiefs had just gone ahead by a point. The Eagles get the ball back. They get to a 3rd and 2. And this is a team that had been making 3rd downs and 4th downs the whole game. Mm-hmm. But you got the ball at your own 34. Are you really willing to make that gamble right there? No, let's kick it away. I can't argue with that too much. I know a lot of people did, but I understand 34-yard line, giving the ball to Pat Mahomes, probably not a good idea. But you're bringing in a lousy punter, and with a coverage unit that is not very good. and you kick it 65-yard return. Now they got the ball at the 5 and they punch it in. That whole sequence, it winds up with the Chiefs scoring 2 touchdowns in like 3 minutes.
Yep.
And I look at that 3rd and 2 play that doesn't seem like a big deal, but Spagnuolo, Steve, who's a very good coach, I think, sends a blitz that the Eagles had not seen before. And it flusters Hurts. He runs out of the pocket, gets flushed out, and just throws the ball away. And now all of a sudden you're off the coach has to make a decision. Do we go for it? Don't go for it. He decides to punt it. You're off the field. You punt it, 65-yard return. Now the 1-point lead is an 8-point lead in 3 minutes. That little sequence there, that 1 3rd and 2 play where Spagnuolo comes with a blitz, the Eagles are caught a little flat-footed, Hurts throws the ball away. Boy, you look back on that whole game, it's so much of it changed right there that that was really a head spinner. But the idea that you get burned on a kick return, given the way the special teams have played all year, that in itself is not a big surprise.
Ray, I want to stay on that strategically because you're right. The 4th and 3 is fascinating. You're down 1. There's 10 and change left. You're at your own 32, right? There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. You got to go for it. Sort of like Doug Peterson did in the Super Bowl. It was a 4th and 1 from their own 45. Granted, there's a 13-yard difference there. But you give the ball back to Mahomes, they're going to score. But the other flip side of that is Kansas City's defense up until that point had done a really good job on the Eagles' offense that half, right? So it is, and you have probably not a great punter. There's not a lot of great options. And I know Sirianni said yesterday, 32 out of 32 NFL coaches would punt there. And I'm not disagreeing with it. I at the time, as I'm watching it in real time, I said punt. I didn't say go for it. I think it's a really hard call what you do there. And you're right. That unraveled everything. Everything just went to kablooey there for sure. But that was a tough turning point, man. And the other thing is, you figure after the Eagles go down and tie at 35 and Hurts gets the 2-pointer, if there's ever a time your defense can finally make a play, it would be that drive. And they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. Plain and simple.
Could not do it. You're right. I think Nick is probably right. I think every coach would have. Look, if he isn't going to go for it, nobody's going to go for it.
That's right.
So, I mean, and I agree with him on that. You're looking at that situation. I mean, if he goes for it and they get stopped and you're giving them the ball at that point, it's, I mean, that's just, that would have been foolhardy, I think. I mean, you wish you had a better punter in that situation, but you're hoping that maybe he gets you a good one. Maybe you get good coverage. Who knows? I mean, Tony is not Devin Hester. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's with Tony. I mean, there's the chance he's just as likely to drop it himself as return at 60 yards. But I mean, it was one of those perfect storms where everything went wrong at the worst possible time. Exactly. And you can second guess it endlessly, but I can't right now to second guess it. It is purely a second guess. At the moment when it's happening and we're all watching it in real time, I'm annoyed that they're in this spot, that you have to make this call. I was hoping they could convert the 3rd down and we wouldn't have to worry about it. But at the moment, okay, we got to make a decision. Yeah, you got to punt it. You got to punt it down there. So I had no problem with the decision, but that whole sequence that plays out there really is what changes everything.
Well, Ray, the one thing that I really can't get out of my craw is the fact that Jonathan Gannon and his personnel got duped on 2 consecutive series on Kansas City's motion. Once to one side, once to the opposite side. And as we know, games period, are games of ever-changing philosophy. And he didn't. He stayed with it, and he got caught with it. Mm-hmm. And you did such a good job. We applauded the job he did so well throughout the regular season. And it's like everything that led up to that game was lost. It was like he couldn't play chess with Andy Reid in any way, shape, or form, especially over the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. We were doing. Barrett knows he was part of it, the pregame show, and we were doing like a checklist of who has the advantage in this category or that category, and the question came up: who has the edge and who has the advantage in coaching coming into this game? And I said, it's the Chiefs, and there was sort of some pushback from the guys in Arizona that
I had the nerve. I had the nerve, Ray. I had the nerve to literally say, "Are you sure about that, Ray?" What was I thinking about?
You had one too many drinks.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I did hear a little pushback coming from Arizona because they thought I was being disrespectful or not giving Nick his props for doing a great coaching job this year. And what I tried to explain was, to me, it's not just a one-on-one question. To me, if you're talking about the coaching, you're talking about the head coach and the two coordinators. And I'm looking at Andy and Bieniemy and Spagnuolo, VS, Nick, and Shane and Jonathan. And the fact that the one team, those guys had 11 combined Super Bowls and you had none. To me, on its face, I got to give the edge to the guys that have been there before. And not to say that, that I'm disrespecting the Eagles coaches, but I got to give the advantage to the guys that have been there before and actually won this game. And there's no question now, looking back on it, that the Chiefs coaches coach circles around the Eagles coaches. And was it purely the experience factor? I don't know. But I mean, that's certainly the way it played out. And I thought that, I don't know if irony is the right word, but I found it ironic that watching the whole second half, I think it was the best 30 minutes of coaching of Andy Reid's career. I really do. And I look back on that, and I think that Andy won this game by running the ball, by managing the clock.
That was one of my keys, though.
And by conserving his timeouts, which are the three things that he didn't do in Super Bowl 39.
Right.
When you lost the game in Jacksonville, you lost it because he didn't run the ball, because he totally mismanaged the clock. And at the end, when you needed the timeouts, he didn't have them. I mean, he wins this one by doing all the things he should have done in Jacksonville.
So glad he learned it, when he was still the Eagles coach, right? And he's got it all perfected now. Makes me feel so much better.
But Rob, it proves something that I've kind of felt watching the last few years of Andy in Kansas City. He's a better coach now than he was when he was here.
I agree. There's no question.
And he was a really good coach here, good coach here for 14 years. I mean, he won the most games, took you to 5 championship games. It's a hell of a resume.
Sure.
When you watch him now, he's a better coach now. Yeah. And that was never more evident than it was on Sunday. That was the best 30 minutes of football I've ever seen him coach. It was really, really good.
Nope. I concur. Ray, hey, thanks. Thanks for joining us all year long. We appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on today. It's always fun kicking this stuff around with you. And hey, get back to enjoying that retirement, my man. Okay?
That's not going to happen. Tell him, Ray, it's not happening.
Hey, I'm already doing my draft preparation.
You're a machine.
Reality check.
What can I tell you? Yeah, you got that. Thanks for reminding me, Barrett. That was true. It was. I hadn't really planned on making a quote unquote comeback. The only reason it happened was because the Eagles had the season they had. But it was a blast, and it was great to come back, and it was great to do this stuff. It was great to work with Barrett again. And it was great to take that whole ride. Even though the ending was a big disappointment, it really was a fun season. And I do think this team has a very bright future. And if there's any silver lining to take away from what happened on Sunday, there ain't no doubt now you got your quarterback.
Absolutely.
You got your quarterback. And that's, and if you're thinking about trying to win a championship, that's a good place to start.
Yep. Well said. Well said. All right, Ray, on that note, thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Be good, man. Be good.
Guys.
You got it, Ray Didinger there. Ray's awesome, man. He is the best.
I mean, it's crazy, man. I had the nerve to question Andy Reid, bro. What was I thinking about? You guys did the same thing. Remember, I kicked back when you guys were talking about it last Wednesday or something like that, man. Eventually I'll learn. You tried to tell me and I didn't listen.
What's funny is that, and we touched on it a couple of times this week about the defense's inability to get to Patrick Mahomes. But I watched the game again yesterday, and especially in the second half, and I said, wait a minute. They were getting close to Patrick. Yep. The only problem was they didn't force him to go where they wanted him to go. They allowed him to go where he wanted to go. And they never made that adjustment to force him to his weak hand side. He always would found a way to step up and slide to the right when he had to. The only time he really slid to the left was when he stepped up and took off on that run for 26 yards. He started to the right and then veered back to the left. But they never were able, with all that pass rushing ability, were never able to make this man go where they wanted him to go. And, you know, good pass rushing defenses have the ability to do two things. One, keep a quarterback in the pocket until somebody can find him. Or two, make him uncomfortable and use his strength against him. And they were never able to do that against Mahomes.
What I tell you we had to do, I told we had to get to the quarterback level and then collapse the pocket.
They didn't do it.
Level, and they kept going around instead of stopping and collapsing. And when you give him that little weight, he can, you know, that control step up and slide over. That means he stays in his quarterback. He stays in his quarterback, you know, mindset and the technique, because he keeps his feet shuffling. You know, he's stepping up the way he's supposed to. If you collapse the pocket around and he can't step up, then it's harder for him to do anything, man. And I saw, like, one time I saw what's his name, Hassan Reddick. He went in, something like don't. He went inside anyways, and that's when he broke around and threw the pass to on the I thought it was a nod route, but I was corrected by Jason. It wasn't a nod route; it was actually a slant and go. And he beat Epps. Epps tried to hit him at the line, and he missed him.
Yeah,
he missed him, man. So
all right, well, we're going to come back and look at who needs to step up. The guys that we know for a fact are going to be back: the Jurgens, the Jordan Davises, the Nakobe Deans, the Reed Blankenships. Are they ready if they get the call? We'll talk about that when we come back. Barrett Brooks, Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis, hanging out with you on this Friday. We are Sports Day, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Let's talk about Pro Action Restoration. If you have a home, you have a business, and you've experienced the inconvenience of water, fire, smoke, mold damage to your property and or your building, you know how trying and how scary that can be. But Pro Action Restoration is on call 24 hours, 7 days a week to help you. I know for a fact because I reached out to them on a Saturday. They got right over to my parents' house. They cleaned up a nasty, their basement was flooded. It was a finished basement that was absolutely flooded. They got over there. They fixed the problem. They cleaned up the water damage. The price was right. The crew was professional. It was a relief more than anything else. So again, whether it's water, fire, smoke, mold remediation, you name it, they can handle it. They are licensed, bonded, fully insured. They've been serving the tri-state area for more than 2 decades. Pro Action Restoration will work in conjunction with your insurance company as well. Give them a call, 610-623-3760, 610-623-3760, or online at proactionrestoration.com. That's proactionrestoration.com.